I had just finished my evening class at the local community college, the room quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioning. I was gathering my papers, shoving pens into my bag, and glancing at the clock, knowing the students would be filing out any minute. I love teaching, but sometimes the end of a long day leaves me feeling a little hollow, like I've poured everything into the world and am now left with an empty cup. That evening felt particularly exhausting, but routine was comforting, and I was ready to go home and sink into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. But then I noticed him, Michael. He had lingered, sitting near the back, his notebook closed, but his gaze steady, like he was waiting for something. Most of my students left without a word, but not him. Something about the way he stayed, the quiet patience in his posture, pulled me out of my usual rhythm. I walked over, offering my standard, "Do you need something?" expecting the usual, "I just had a question about homework." Instead, he looked up at me, his eyes warm, slightly hesitant, and said something I wasn't expecting. "I wanted to say thank you for noticing." His words, simple as they were, landed differently than I thought they would. There was a weight to them, a sincerity that made me pause mid-step. I hadn't realized how rarely anyone had truly looked me in the eyes like that, really looked. The room seemed suddenly smaller, quieter, the fluorescent lights buzzing gently above us, the scent of dry erase markers lingering faintly in the air. I found myself kneeling down slightly to meet his gaze, feeling an unexpected swell of protectiveness and curiosity. "For noticing what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but even I could hear the softness threading through it. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then said, "That I'm trying. That I care about more than just getting grades. That I'm listening." His words were careful, deliberate, and honest in a way that made my chest tighten. It was a moment that neither of us rushed. The emptiness of the classroom, the distant echoes from the hallway outside, the soft scratch of chalk against the board from earlier, it all seemed to conspire to make this pause feel like a tiny eternity. I realized then that teaching him had always been different. He wasn't just a student checking boxes. He was present, thoughtful, and deeply reflective. And in that instant, the unspoken tension between teacher and student, something I'd never entertained before, shifted into something entirely human, entirely vulnerable. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me I hadn't expected. "I notice a lot of things," I said gently, "sometimes more than I probably should." His lips quirked into a shy, knowing smile. We lingered in that shared silence, a quiet understanding settling between us, unspoken but heavy with meaning. And in that lingering moment, I felt the first stirrings of something profound, something neither of us could fully name yet, but something that would grow. He waited until everyone left, and in that waiting, he opened a door neither of us realized was there. After that evening, I couldn't stop thinking about him, Michael, and that quiet, unexpected conversation. It wasn't just that he had stayed behind. It was the way he had spoken, the way he had looked at me like I mattered in a way that went beyond the classroom. I kept replaying it in my mind, imagining the small movements, the way his hand brushed against the notebook when he closed it, the subtle tension in his shoulders that eased only when he spoke. There was something about it that left me both unsettled and exhilarated at the same time. A week later, the class ended, and for a moment, I thought he wouldn't stay behind. But there he was, leaning casually against the edge of a desk, waiting. My heart skipped, though I tried to hide it behind a professional smile. "Hey," I said, letting the word linger between us, soft but charged. "Hi," he replied, and there it was again, that pause, that sense of mutual acknowledgement that felt bigger than either of us could explain. He was holding something in his hands, a notebook, a worn leather journal, and he hesitated before offering it to me. "I wanted to share something with you." "Only if you want to see it," he said, his voice low, careful, like he was stepping into unknown territory. Curiosity won over caution, and I nodded. He handed it to me gently, and as I opened it, I found pages filled with reflections, sketches, little observations about the world, notes about people, life, even moments from class. I could feel the hours he must have spent thinking, writing, shaping his inner life into something tangible. I turned the pages slowly, absorbing every word. "It's beautiful," I'd whispered, a lump forming in my throat. "You have a way of seeing things, noticing what others miss." He smiled, that shy, earnest smile again, and shrugged as if embarrassed by praise. "I wanted you to know that your classes make a difference," he said, his voice almost trembling. "I don't just come for the homework or the grade. I come because you make me think and notice and feel." His words, so earnest, so raw, settled over me like a soft blanket. I had taught hundreds of students before, but none had ever expressed something like this. And in that moment, I realized that the connection we shared wasn't simply academic. It was something deeper, something quietly profound. I took a deep breath, closing the journal and meeting his eyes. "Thank you, Michael," I said, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. "That means more than I can say. Truly." He nodded, and for a few moments, we just stood there, suspended in the quiet of the empty classroom. The hum of the overhead lights, the faint smell of dry chalk and old textbooks, and the distant echo of a janitor's mop in the hallway. It all became part of the intimacy between us, the unspoken understanding that something meaningful was unfolding. As he finally turned to leave, I realized I didn't want him to go, not yet. "Would you like to talk more? Maybe after class tomorrow?" I asked, my voice softer than intended. He hesitated, then nodded, his eyes locking with mine. "I'd like that," he said simply. And with that, he left, leaving me standing in the quiet room, my mind racing, my heart strangely full, and a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. That night, I lay awake thinking about him, about us. About how sometimes the most unexpected connections come when you least anticipate them, and how the simplest words, spoken with sincerity, can open doors you didn't even know existed. Something had shifted, and I felt it deep in my bones. Our story was only just beginning. The next day, I found myself lingering near the classroom door, a mixture of anticipation and nervous energy swirling in my chest. I had taught hundreds of students over the years, but nothing had ever felt like this, like waiting for someone to step into a space that only existed between the two of us. When Michael walked in, he gave me that same quiet, thoughtful smile, and suddenly the classroom felt warmer, more alive, even though it was empty of other students. We settled into 2 chairs near the back, not too close, not too far, just the right distance where conversation could flow, but where the silence could also breathe. He opened his notebook again, flipping to a page with a sketch of a tree I remembered from one of our earlier discussions. "I was thinking about our class yesterday," he said softly, "about noticing things. It made me realize how little I pay attention sometimes, how easy it is to go through life without really seeing people." His words struck me deeply. I nodded slowly. It's true. Life moves so fast, we often forget to notice the little things, the details that make people who they are. It's a shame, really. He looked up at me, his eyes holding something I couldn't quite name. Vulnerability, curiosity, a quiet longing. "I notice you," he said simply, almost as if it were the easiest truth in the world. "Not just your teaching, but you. How you care, how you see people." My heart skipped, a rush of warmth spreading through me. There was a tenderness in his voice, a patience in his demeanor that made me want to reach across the small gap between us, to bridge the quiet tension that had been building over weeks without either of us admitting it. I swallowed, keeping my voice steady, though my hands betrayed me by fidgeting with the edge of my cardigan. "Michael, that's incredibly kind of you to say." He shrugged lightly, but I could see the subtle trembling in his hands. "I mean it," he said, and there it was again, that sincerity that seemed to draw me in against my better judgment. We spent the next hour talking, though it didn't feel like an hour. It felt like moments suspended outside of time. He shared thoughts he'd never voiced before, worries he kept hidden, dreams that seemed too fragile to voice aloud. And I shared too, cautiously, the small parts of myself I didn't often reveal to anyone. Every word, every pause, every fleeting glance built a bridge between us, connecting our experiences in ways that felt startlingly intimate. At one point, he leaned back in his chair and laughed softly, the sound echoing in the empty room. I don't think I've ever felt this. Comfortable with someone my age, he admitted, a little sheepishly. His honesty hit me like a gentle wave. I realized that connection isn't bound by years or titles. It's about understanding, respect, and the willingness to be present. I smiled, a warmth spreading through my chest that I hadn't anticipated. And I've never met a student who made me think this much, or feel this much, I said. It was the truth. Teaching him had always been different, but now it felt like something more, something deeply human and alive. As the sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting golden stripes across the classroom floor, I felt a profound shift in my heart. There was no rush, no pressure, just a recognition that something meaningful was blossoming between us, something that neither of us could define yet, but both could feel. When he finally stood to leave, he paused by the door, hesitating. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, a gentle question that carried weight. I nodded, feeling a quiet thrill. "Yes," I said. "I'll be here." As the door clicked shut behind him, I sank into my chair, letting the emotions settle. I realized that life had a way of surprising you, of offering moments you never expected but desperately needed. And in the quiet aftermath, I understood that our story was no longer just about teacher and student. It was about two people discovering each other, slowly, respectfully, and with an intimacy that neither of us had anticipated, but both of us craved. The days that followed felt like a slow unfolding, each moment with Michael quietly deepening the connection that had started in that empty classroom. We met after class more and more often, sometimes to discuss assignments, sometimes just to talk. And with every conversation, I felt layers of my own guardedness melting away. It was strange how someone I'd only known as a student could touch parts of me I hadn't realized were still waiting to be seen. One late afternoon, the classroom was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, the golden light spilling across the desks and casting long shadows on the floor. Michael stayed behind again, notebook in hand, but this time there was no hesitation in his movements. He looked at me, eyes steady and warm, and spoke with a quiet certainty that made my heart beat faster. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about noticing life, noticing people," he said. "I realized I want to be more present, not just in your class, but in life. And I want to be honest about what I feel, about you." The words hung in the air, fragile and heavy at the same time. I felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of surprise, fear, and something else, something tender and exhilarating. "Michael," I began, but he held up a hand, gentle, patient. "Please, just listen. I'm not asking for anything but your honesty. I just want you to know how deeply you've impacted me." I sat down, letting the words settle in. And in that quiet moment, I realized I had felt the same way for weeks, this strange, beautiful, and wholly unexpected connection. It wasn't about age or titles or who was teacher and who was student. It was about recognition, trust, and the courage to be vulnerable. "I feel it too," I admitted softly. "I didn't expect this, any of this. But I can't deny that you've become important to me, more than I ever thought possible." He smiled, relief and warmth radiating from him, and for the first time, there was no hesitation, no careful measuring of words. We talked until the room grew dark, until the quiet hum of the outside world seemed to pause for us. And when he finally stood to leave, There was a sense of completion in the air, not an ending, but a turning point. Walking home that evening, I reflected on how life can surprise you in the most unexpected ways. How someone can arrive quietly, with honesty and respect, and change the way you see the world and yourself. I thought about connection, intimacy, and the subtle courage it takes to let someone in, to truly see and be seen. Sitting in my living room later, sipping tea and looking out at the fading light, I realized that what had started as a simple conversation after class had grown into something profound, something that reminded me that life is never static, never predictable, and that the heart has an infinite capacity for understanding and love, no matter your age. Michael had waited until everyone left, and in doing so, he showed me the power of patience, sincerity, and emotional courage. He changed everything, not just for me, but for the way I would approach life and connection moving forward. And as I let that thought settle in, I smiled, feeling a quiet gratitude for the unexpected, for the deeply human moments that make life extraordinary. Some connections arrive quietly, some take patience. Some, like this one, change you forever.